The cattle in the field froze first. Their heads turned together toward the western sky, ears flicking, eyes wide. A second later, the ground shook hard enough to knock fence posts loose. Then came the light. A long streak of orange tore across the desert sky, lower than any plane should fly, faster than any meteor should fall. It passed over a sleeping town, over empty highways, over a single gas station where an old man dropped his coffee and stared. The object struck the Nevada desert with a sound that was felt more than heard. A wall of dust rose half a mile into the air. Windows cracked in towns 30 miles away. By the time the dust began to settle, the sky was already filling with helicopters. Daniel was pulled out of bed at 3 in the morning. He did not ask questions on the flight. He had worked with the government long enough to know that questions came later and answers came rarely. When the helicopter landed at the edge of the crater, he stepped out into a world that did not feel like Earth anymore. The crater was wider than a stadium and deeper than a building. Floodlights had been set up around the rim. Soldiers in masks moved in careful lines. And at the bottom, half buried in dirt and broken rock, sat a ship. It was long and dark, shaped like a fish but covered in plates of metal that caught the light strangely. One side of it was burned. The other side was almost untouched. There were no engines on fire, no smoke, no sound. The ship simply sat there as if it had always belonged in that hole. Daniel walked the rim of the crater for almost an hour before climbing down. 2 members of his team followed him. The first was Hina, a quiet woman who studied metals for a living. She spoke only when she had something useful to say. The second was Ravi, a younger man who could read computer code the way other people read poems. He talked too much, but he was clever, and Daniel needed clever people. The 3 of them stopped in front of the ship. Up close, it was even stranger. The metal felt warm but not hot. It did not look like steel or aluminum. It looked almost like skin. "It is not damaged from the crash," Hina said after a long silence. She placed her gloved hand on a deep cut in the hull. "This wound is old. It has already healed." Daniel frowned. "Healed?" She nodded. The metal moved slowly, over time like a scar. Ravi was busy pointing his scanner at a panel near what looked like a door. "There is power inside," he said. "Low but steady. Something is still alive in there." A general arrived an hour later. He was a short man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked at the ship, then at Daniel, then at the ship again. "You have 6 months," the general said. "Study it, take it apart, learn what you can, then we bury it." Daniel turned to him slowly. "Bury it." "There are bigger powers in this world than us," the general said. "If word gets out, every country will want a piece, so we hide it, we forget it, we move on." Daniel did not argue. He had learned long ago that arguing with generals was like arguing with weather. But as he watched the man walk away, he made a quiet promise to himself. 6 months was not enough, not for something like this. Over the next 2 weeks, a small base was built around the crater. Tents became buildings. Roads were paved at night. A roof was placed over the ship so that satellites passing overhead would see only sand. Daniel slept 4 hours a night and worked the rest. The first real discovery came on the 11th day. Ravi found a way to open one of the outer panels. It did not slide or hinge. It melted away, then formed back together a few moments later. Inside, on the wall, were rows of symbols carved into the metal. Hina photographed them. Ravi fed them into a translation program he had built himself, one that compared the shapes to every known language pattern, human or theoretical. The program ran for 2 days. When the results finally came, Ravi called Daniel into the tent at midnight. The young man looked pale. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Ravi turned the screen around. There were only 2 words translated, repeated again and again across the wall. "Defective. Discarded." Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. He understood now. The ship had not crashed. It had been dumped. Whoever built it had decided it was broken. They had flown it to the nearest empty world and dropped it like trash. Earth, in their eyes, was not a planet. It was a landfill. He should have felt insulted. Instead, he felt something else, curiosity, and under that something colder, something that felt almost like anger. He walked out of the tent and stood in the cold desert wind. The covered ship sat silent in the dark behind him. He thought of every machine he had ever fixed in his life, cars that the owners had given up on, engines that had been called dead, old planes brought back into the sky. Humans were good at one thing above all others. They were good at taking what others threw away and making it work again. He turned and walked back to the tent. "Wake Hina," he said to Ravi. "We are not burying this thing. We are going to fly it." Ravi blinked at him. "Fly it." Daniel did not answer. He was already studying the symbols again, looking for the next door to open. Rain came to the desert on the 18th day, which was rare enough that the workers stopped to watch it. Thin gray clouds moved across the sky, dropping cold water on the dust. The covered roof above the crater drummed softly. Inside, beneath that roof, the ship sat as silent as ever, but the people around it had changed. They moved with purpose now. They moved like a team that had been told no but had decided to keep going. Hina was inside the ship for the first time that morning. She stepped through the soft opening Ravi had unlocked the week before. The walls of the corridor glowed faintly with a green light that seemed to come from nowhere. The air was breathable. That alone had surprised everyone. She walked slowly, her boots clicking softly on the smooth floor. Each room she entered told her something new. The kitchen was too small for adults. The chairs were narrow and tall. The beds were short. Whoever had flown this ship was thinner and taller than humans, and there had not been many of them. She counted only 6 sleeping spaces in the entire vessel. In what looked like a control room, she found something that made her stop. A long crack ran across one of the main floor panels. It was old, sealed over with the same self-healing metal as the outer hull. But what caught her eye was the warning sign carved beside it. The symbol was simple. Even without translation, she understood it. "Danger, do not use this ship." She called Ravi. He arrived a few minutes later with his scanner and his usual loud opinions, both of which went quiet when he saw the crack. "This is the failure," he said softly. "This is why they threw the ship away." Hina knelt down and ran her fingers along the seam. "It is just a stress crack, a small one. Our submarines have worse than this." Ravi laughed once. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of a man who had just understood something important. "They were afraid," he said. "They saw this little crack and they panicked. They flew the whole ship out here and dumped it because of this." Hina looked up at him. "Then they are not as advanced as we thought." "No," Ravi said. "They are very advanced, but they are also very careful. Maybe too careful. They probably have rules, probably very old rules. If a ship fails any test, it is dead. No second chances." That evening, Daniel called the team together inside the largest tent at the base. There were 14 of them now, all sworn to secrecy, all chosen because they were good at their work and bad at following pointless orders. He stood in front of a screen showing the cracked floor panel. "This is what they were afraid of," Daniel said. "This is the reason the ship is sitting in our desert." A welder near the back snorted. "I could fix that in an afternoon." "That is the point," Daniel said. "They cannot, or they will not. Their entire system is built around avoiding risk. Ours is built around taking it." He let the words sit in the air for a moment. "They threw this ship away because they thought it was broken," he continued. "But it is not broken. It is just hurt, and we know how to fix things that are hurt." Hina spoke next. She explained what she had learned about the alien metal. It responded to small electric currents. When a current passed through it, the metal grew slightly stronger, slightly tougher. The aliens, it seemed, had never tested it past a certain limit. They had assumed the metal would break. Hina had pushed it further in a small sample and it had not broken. It had hardened. Ravi spoke after her. He had cracked more of the language. He had found logs, travel records, star maps. The ship had come from a region of space roughly 2,000 light-years away. It belonged to a civilization that called itself, in rough translation, the Carekeepers. They were old. They were peaceful. They were also, in Ravi's careful words, boring. They have not built a new type of ship in 900 years, he said. They do not need to. Their ships work. They are safe. They are gentle, but they are also slow and weak and full of warnings. They have forgotten how to take chances. Daniel listened to all of it. Then he made his decision. We rebuild the ship, he said. Not the way they built it, the way we would build it, stronger plates, better welds, human computers running underneath theirs, our software in charge, their hardware doing the work. A long silence followed. And then, asked the welder. Then we fly it, Daniel said. The next morning the team began the quiet hearing. People were called from old jobs, brought in under fake projects, given new badges and new names. A submarine engineer from Norway arrived first, then a young coder from Pakistan, then a metallurgist from Brazil. None of them were told the full truth at first. They were told only that something important had been found, and that the world would change because of it. Above the crater, the rain kept falling for 3 more days. The desert turned briefly green. Flowers that no one had seen in years pushed up through the cracked ground. Daniel stood outside one evening and watched them grow. He thought about the alien word for Earth, junkyard, landfill. He thought about how the aliens had not even bothered to look down before they left. If they had, they would have seen people who knew how to make broken things live again. He turned and walked back into the tent. The work was waiting. 3 months later, the desert above the crater looked exactly the same. The sand drifted across the same dirt roads. The fake weather station sign at the gate had faded slightly in the sun. A bored guard sat in a small booth, waving through trucks that delivered what the paperwork called farming equipment. Underneath the desert, however, almost nothing was the same. A wide hangar had been carved into the rock around the crater. Lights burned day and night. Welders worked in shifts. Computers hummed in cold rooms. Walkways crossed above the ship like spider webs, and on every walkway people moved with tools, parts, and tablets. The ship itself, the Vagabond as they had begun calling it, was no longer just an alien object sitting in a hole. It was changing. Where the outer plates had been thin and elegant, they were now thicker, layered with human steel under the alien skin. Where the inside corridors had been narrow, walls had been moved to fit human bodies. Where the alien computers had refused certain commands, Ravi and his team had quietly buried new circuits underneath them. The alien systems still ran. They simply did not realize they were no longer in charge. A young woman walked into the hangar that morning carrying a flight bag. Her name was Sarah, and she was 26 years old. She had flown jets for the Pakistan Air Force, then test planes for a private company in the United States, and she had been recruited the month before. She had not been told what she was being hired to fly. She had only been told that she would be the first to fly it. When she saw the Vagabond for the first time, she stopped walking. The bag slipped from her shoulder. She stared up at the long, dark shape of the ship, half rebuilt, half alien, half human, and she laughed quietly to herself. "What is so funny?" Daniel asked, walking up beside her. "I knew it would be strange," she said. "I did not know it would be beautiful." Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. He liked her already. The next 2 months were the hardest. Sarah trained inside a copy of the cockpit that Hina had built in a side room. Every control was tested, every reaction measured. The alien controls had been designed for thin fingers and slow movements. The team adjusted them. The seat was replaced. The screens were rewritten in English and 3 other languages. The ship would respond to a human pilot, or it would not fly at all. Outside, the world was beginning to ask questions. A satellite from another country had photographed strange truck movements in the desert. A reporter in California had written a small article about unusual activity near the old Air Force testing zones. The story had not gone far, but it had not gone away. Daniel knew their time was running out. One evening in the main tent, the team gathered for a small meeting that none of them would ever forget. Daniel stood in front of them, his hands in his pockets, his face tired but calm. "We will fly in 2 weeks," he said, "whether everything is ready or not." A long silence followed, then Hina nodded once, Ravi nodded twice, Sarah only smiled. "Why call it the Vagabond?" the Norwegian engineer asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "Because it was thrown away," he said. "Because it had no home. Because someone picked it up off the ground and decided it still mattered." He looked around the tent. He looked at the faces of people from many countries, many backgrounds, many languages. None of them were here for money. None of them were here for fame. They were here because they had been told something was impossible, and they wanted to prove it wrong. The final week was a blur. Last welds were finished. Last circuits were tested. Sarah slept 4 hours a night. Ravi did not sleep at all. Hina walked the inside of the ship over and over, pressing her hands against the walls, listening for sounds only she could hear. On the night before the flight, Daniel walked alone to the rim of the crater. He looked down at the Vagabond, lit by soft lights, almost unrecognizable from the broken object that had crashed there 4 months ago. The ship had been called defective. It had been called discarded. Now it had a new name, written in small white paint on the side of its hull. Vagabond. He thought about the aliens, the carekeepers, who had thrown this ship away. He wondered if any of them still remembered it. He wondered if they would care that it was about to fly again. He suspected they would. Behind him, footsteps approached. Sarah walked up and stood beside him at the edge. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "So am I," she said, "but I am also something else." "What?" She thought for a moment. "Hungry," she said, "hungry to see what is up there." Daniel laughed quietly. They stood together for a long time looking at the ship. In the morning, the roof above the crater would open. The Vagabond would rise on its repaired engines, slowly at first, then faster still, until it broke through the desert sky and pushed past the edge of the world. But for now the ship slept, the team slept, the desert slept. Only the stars were awake, blinking quietly above, waiting for the first human visitor to arrive in a vessel that had once been called trash. A coyote on the ridge above the desert lifted its head and listened. It heard something the humans below could not hear yet, a low hum coming from deep beneath the sand. The animal stared for a moment, ears twitching, then turned and ran into the dark hills. Whatever was happening at that crater, it wanted no part of it. Inside the hangar, the roof began to slide open. Cold night air poured in, smelling of dust and sagebrush. The Vagabond sat in its cradle, lit from below by soft blue lights. Steam rose around its hull as the cooling systems came alive. The ship looked almost alive itself, breathing slowly in the desert silence. Sarah sat in the pilot's seat. Her hands were steady on the controls. Her heart, she would later admit, was not. Above her, through the curved cockpit window, she could see a thin strip of stars between the open roof panels. She had flown many things in her life. She had flown jets at 3 times the speed of sound. She had flown experimental drones over oceans. None of it had felt like this. A voice spoke in her ear. It was Ravi from the control room. "All systems green," he said. "Alien core stable. Human override holding. You have a window of 6 minutes before the next satellite passes overhead." 6 minutes, Sarah repeated. "Take your time," Daniel said in her other ear, "but not too much." Sarah smiled inside her helmet. She breathed in, then out, then pushed the throttle forward. The ship rose. It did not roar. It did not shake. It simply lifted, as gentle as a leaf rising on a breeze, except this leaf was the size of a building. The Vagabond climbed straight up through the open roof, then tilted slightly, then climbed faster. The hangar fell away. The desert fell away. The thin clouds fell away. In less than 2 minutes, the sky outside the window turned from blue to deep purple to black. Sarah saw the stars. She had seen them from planes before. She had even seen them from the edge of space once, in a test flight that had nearly killed her. But she had never seen them like this. They were sharp and clear and endless. She could see the curve of the earth below her, blue and quiet, with a thin line of dawn beginning on the eastern edge. For a moment she forgot to speak, then she remembered. "I am in orbit," she said softly. "It is working." A cheer went up in the control room far below. Daniel did not cheer. He stood in front of the main screen with his arms crossed, watching the vagabond's progress, his face calm but his eyes wet. Then the alarm began. It was not from the vagabond. It was from a sensor station that Ravi had set up months ago, listening to the deep parts of the solar system, just in case. The alarm was small, red, steady. Ravi stared at it for 2 long seconds before he understood what he was seeing. "Daniel," he said. Daniel turned. "Something just lit up," Ravi said. "Far out, past the orbit of Saturn, a probe, small, old. It was sleeping and now it is not." "Sleeping." Ravi swallowed. "They left it, the carekeepers. They left a watcher near the edge of our system, to make sure no one ever flew the ship again. The moment the vagabond turned on its main engines, that probe woke up." Daniel did not move for a moment. "What is it doing now?" "Transmitting," Ravi said. "A long signal aimed at deep space, toward home." Daniel closed his eyes for 2 seconds. When he opened them, his face had hardened. "How long until that signal reaches them?" "Faster than light," Ravi said. "Their tech is strange, days maybe, a week at most." In orbit, Sarah was still flying. She did not know about the probe yet. She circled the Earth once slowly, letting the ship show her what it could do. She tested the turns. She tested the speed. The vagabond responded to her like a horse that had been waiting years for a rider it could trust. It was not perfect. The left side of the ship still groaned when she pushed it. The bottom plates ran warmer than they should, but it flew. It flew well. She brought the vagabond down on the eastern side of the hangar, just as the sun began to rise over the desert. The landing was rough. A dust storm rose around the ship as it touched the ground, but the vagabond was home. Sarah climbed out of the cockpit on shaky legs and was immediately wrapped in a hug from Hina, who almost never hugged anyone. The whole team came down to meet her. There was laughter, shouting, even a few tears. Someone had brought a bottle of cheap champagne. It was opened and poured into paper cups. But Daniel did not drink. He stood off to one side, his eyes on the cooling ship, his mind on the small red alarm in the control room. Sarah saw him. She walked over, still wiping her eyes. "What is wrong?" she asked. He told her about the probe. She was silent for a long moment. The morning sun touched her face. Behind her, the team was still cheering. They did not know yet. "So they know we have it," she said quietly. "They know we flew it." "Yes," Daniel said. She looked up at the sky, where the stars were already fading into morning blue. "Then we had better not stop here," she said. "We had better build more." Daniel turned to her and nodded once. "We already are," he said. A fisherman off the coast of Japan was the first to see them. He was pulling in his nets at dawn when he noticed 2 shapes hanging in the sky. They did not move. They did not blink. They simply hovered, silver against the pink morning clouds, large enough to block the sun when it rose. He dropped his nets and reached for his phone. By the time he had pointed the camera up, 3 more shapes had appeared next to the first 2. Within an hour, every news channel on Earth was showing the same image. By noon, the 5 ships had been joined by 12 more, all of them silent, all of them spread evenly around the planet. They did not land. They did not speak. They simply waited. Daniel was watching the news in the underground hangar when the call came in. A signal had been sent down from the largest of the ships. It was clean, clear, and translated into 9 human languages. It said only one sentence: "Return what was left behind." The world looked to its governments. The governments looked to each other. None of them admitted they knew anything. None of them admitted they had a ship. Within hours, 3 separate countries had reached out to Daniel's base, demanding to be allowed in. He turned them all down. He did not have time for them. The aliens did not wait long. The next morning, a single smaller vessel detached from the largest ship and flew down through Earth's atmosphere. It landed gently in the desert, only 2 miles from the crater. It did not ask permission. It did not announce itself. It simply chose its spot and settled. Daniel went out to meet it alone. He carried no weapon. He wore no uniform. He drove an old white pickup truck across the sand and parked it about 50 feet from the alien ship. Then he stepped out, leaned against the truck, and waited. The door of the small ship opened with a soft hiss. A figure stepped out. It was tall, taller than any human, and very thin. Its skin was pale gray, almost silver. Its eyes were large and dark. It wore a long white robe that touched the desert sand. It looked at Daniel for a long moment, and then it walked toward him with slow, careful steps, as if the gravity of Earth was unkind to its bones. A small device on its collar spoke for it. "I am called Veshin," the voice said. It was soft, polite, and very tired. "I am the speaker for the council that built the ship you are using." Daniel said. "I am the man who fixed it." Veshin's large eyes blinked slowly. He did not respond to the word fixed. He chose his next words carefully. "The ship was discarded for a reason," he said. "It is dangerous. You should not be flying it. We are here to take it back." Daniel did not move from the side of the truck. "You threw it away," he said. "You left it on our planet. You did not even ask if anyone lived here." Veshin looked uncomfortable. "Your planet was listed as undeveloped. We did not believe a thinking species was present." "You did not look," Daniel said. Veshin was silent for a moment. "No," he admitted, "we did not look." Daniel nodded once slowly. "Then you do not get to come back now and tell us what is dangerous and what is not. We will decide that for ourselves." The alien tilted his head. Something like surprise moved across his thin face. He had not expected this. He had expected fear or anger or begging. He had not expected calm. "May I see the ship?" Veshin asked. Daniel thought about it. Then he opened the door of his truck. "Get in," he said. The alien hesitated, then folded his long body into the passenger seat with difficulty. His knees pressed against the dashboard. Daniel drove him back across the desert to the hangar. They did not speak during the ride. Veshin looked out the window the whole time, watching the dry brown earth pass by, watching a small lizard run across the road, watching a hawk float on the wind above. He looked at it all with the slow eyes of a man who had never imagined such a place could matter. When they reached the hangar, Daniel led him inside. The vagabond sat in its cradle, freshly cleaned, the white paint of its name still bright on the hull. Veshin stopped walking. He stared at the ship for a long time. He looked at the thick human steel layered under the alien skin. He looked at the heavy welds, the reinforced doors, the human computers mounted beside alien panels. He looked at the cracked floor panel, now covered with a strong human plate, screwed and welded into place. His thin shoulders dropped. "This is stronger than the ships we still fly," he said quietly. Daniel said nothing. "We could not do this," Veshin continued. "We have not done this in 900 years. We do not even try anymore." "I know," Daniel said. The alien turned to look at him. For the first time there was no calm politeness in his face. There was only fear. "You do not understand what you have done," Veshin said. "The council will not allow this. They will come. They will be many and they will be afraid of you. Afraid creatures do dangerous things." Daniel met his eyes. "Then they should know one thing before they come," he said. "What?" "We are not stopping at one ship," Daniel said. We are building more. We have been building more for months. Veshin stared at him. His translator hummed quietly, but he did not speak. Outside, the wind moved across the desert. Somewhere far above, 17 silent ships waited in the sky. The storm was coming. Daniel was ready. In a quiet hall on a faraway world, 12 old beings sat in a circle. The hall was made of pale stone and soft light. There were no flags. There were no weapons. There had not been a war in this hall for 900 years. The 12 beings called themselves the High Voice of the Carekeepers, and for a long time they had been the most powerful council in this part of the galaxy. They were not used to being afraid. Today they were afraid. A small screen in the center of the room played a recording from Veshin. They had watched it 3 times. They had seen the rebuilt ship. They had seen the human steel. They had seen the calm face of a man who had been called a child of a junkyard world and had answered by building a fleet. "He is one man," one of the council finally said. "His people are young, we can stop them." "We cannot," another answered. "We have not built a new ship in 9 centuries. We have forgotten how. They have not." A third leaned forward. "Then we destroy them before they grow." The hall went silent. The word destroy had not been spoken in this room for longer than any of them had been alive. It felt wrong in the air, like smoke from a fire that should not have been lit. "There is another way," said a quiet voice from the back. It belonged to the oldest of them, a small thin being whose pale eyes had seen many things. "We could talk to them." The others turned to look at her. "Talk to them as equals," she said. "Before they decide they do not need to talk to us at all." Back on Earth, 2 weeks had passed. The 17 alien ships still hung in the sky, silent and waiting. Veshin had not returned to them. He had stayed in the hangar, sleeping on a small cot, asking quiet questions, watching the humans work. He had begun to like coffee, though it gave him headaches. He had begun to like Hina, though he did not understand most of her jokes. He was sitting beside Ravi when the new signal came. It was different from the first one. This one did not demand, it did not threaten, it only asked. "We wish to meet." A location was given. It was deep in space, far beyond Earth's solar system, near a quiet blue star. A council meeting was being called. Many species would attend. Humanity was invited. Daniel read the message twice. Then he walked out of the control room and down to the hangar floor. The vagabond was no longer alone there. 3 more ships stood beside it, each smaller, each new, each built from the lessons the first one had taught them. They did not have alien skin. They had only human steel and human design, but they were faster and stronger than anything Earth had ever made. Quiet factories in 5 countries had been working night and day for months. More ships were on the way. Sarah was waiting beside the vagabond, dressed in her flight suit. She had a small smile on her face. She always had a small smile now. "They want to meet," Daniel said. "I heard," Sarah said. "When do we leave?" He thought about it for a long moment. He thought about the desert behind him, and the cattle that had once stared at the falling star, and the old man at the gas station who had dropped his coffee, and the millions of people across the world who still did not know what their planet had quietly built underneath itself. "Tomorrow," he said. The next morning, 4 ships rose together from the desert. The vagabond led them, scarred and proud, its white name still painted on the hull. Behind it flew the 3 new vessels, each filled with a small crew of humans from many countries. Hina sat beside Ravi on the second ship. Veshin sat with Daniel on the vagabond, his thin hands folded politely in his lap. Sarah flew at the front. They passed through Earth's atmosphere without trouble. They passed the moon. They passed Mars. At the edge of the solar system, the old alien probe still floated, no longer transmitting, simply watching. Sarah waved at it as they flew by. Then the vagabond lit its long engines, and the 4 small ships from Earth jumped into deep space. They arrived at the quiet blue star 3 days later. It was not a battle, it was not a war, it was a meeting. Ships from 40 different species filled the space around the star. Some were massive, some were tiny, some glowed, some hid in darkness. All of them watched as the 4 small human ships flew in and took their place in the circle, the smallest fleet there, and yet somehow the one everyone was looking at. The old being from the council spoke first, broadcasting her voice across all ships in all languages. "You were not invited to the galaxy," she said. "You came anyway. What do you want?" Daniel stood on the bridge of the Vagabond. Veshan stood quietly behind him. Sarah waited at the controls. Across the void, 40 species were listening. Daniel spoke clearly. He did not shout, he did not threaten. "We do not want your ships," he said. "We do not want your worlds, we do not want your fear. We want only one thing." "What?" "To be counted," Daniel said. "Not as a junkyard, not as a discarded planet. As people, talk to us and we will talk back. Trade with us and we will trade fairly. Threaten us and you will learn what we already know about ourselves. We do not stop, we do not break easily, and we are very, very good at fixing things you have thrown away." The Hall of Ships was silent for a long time. Then slowly, the old being on the screen bowed her head. "Counted," she said softly, "so be it." Behind Daniel, through the window of the Vagabond, the stars stretched out forever in every direction. The ship that had once been called defective floated quietly at the front of a fleet that had only just begun. Humanity had arrived. The galaxy would never be the same.